Hello and Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for joining us again for this number 2 in a series of talks on 10 teachings of Bhakti. So that we don't download too much per session, I'm keeping it a little simple tonight. We have second in our series of talks is, last week we talked about philosophy. We talked about philosophy being the love of knowledge, the philosophia, love of knowledge. And then we posed the question, of course, what is knowledge? And that's really the question, isn't it? What is knowledge? What is truth? What is real news? What is fake news? What is actual fact? What is a conspiracy theory? And we said that it depended on evidence or proof. How do you prove something to your full satisfaction so that you know that it's really, really the truth? Well, philosophers, particularly Indian philosophers, Vedic philosophers, are very interested in this question because of the question of Maya, or illusion. In other words, knowledge is ultimately for freeing us from the illusion which causes pain. It is not just the Vedic philosophers, but even the non-Vedic philosophers like Gautama Buddha. He said that ultimately everything is suffering in this world, and we should be aiming for that knowledge which will free us from suffering. So where do we find that knowledge? Well, the Vedas say that it depends on evidence. Evidence means that you'll be able to sort through one stream of knowledge from another, and ultimately you'll find what's real and what's not real. And in order to do that, we have to know why we're doing it. So every philosopher should start with the basic premise that all is suffering, all is misery, and I would like to put an end to all of this. Not end it. And such suicidal tendencies, we don't want to become materially negative like that. We should be negative. We should be really, you could say, negative about the possibility of finding happiness within the material body, but at the same time positive of finding happiness from another source. That's the whole point. We should not be miserable. Another thing we like is wealth, joy, contentment, satisfaction, peace, love, happiness, all of the above. So how do we do that? So the Vedas, well, let's not start with Vedas. We talked about other sources of information. We talked about pratyaksha, which was sense observation, and we said how that was fallible. We said that, or invalid and fallible. We talked about Anuman, which was inference. For instance, I see it's raining. I deduce from that it's raining. That's my sense observation. I can't see the rain, but someone enters my room shaking an umbrella from which drops come. And he says, oh, it's chucking it down out there. And that is, well, before he opens his mouth, that's Anuman. When he does open his mouth, because I trust him, that's Shabda, or evidence from a reliable source. If I trust him, of course. If I know that the person coming into my room is a practical joker, and he's joked with me on 3 separate occasions, then when he says, oh, it's chucking it out there, I'll know that he's perhaps playing a prank. So Shabda only covers the eventuality of dealing with a person whose evidence is proven on other occasions to be correct. So we need such evidence. Otherwise, we'll search for knowledge, but we won't know when we've got it. So, which sources are admissible? Pratyaksha, Anuman, and Shabda. There's another category called Veda. And Veda is in a separate category because it is Shabda, but it's the universe speaking about itself. Now, in most cultures, there's a holy text, a sacred text. For the Jews and Christians, it's the Bible. For the Muslims, the Quran. For the Sikhs, it's the Guru Granth Sahib. Everybody has a holy book by which the ultimate perspective on the universe is said to be gained. But each one of those we can trace to a historical source. There's a date before which that sacred scripture, that text, was not existing. There's a date after it exists. So we can trace it historically, geographically. With the Veda, it has existed since the beginning of calculated history. We cannot trace the origin. Now this makes intellect rebel, because if you say that something is from beyond recorded history, well, what do we have that's beyond that? Well, we have things like DNA. DNA, we know that the code of DNA is there before I was existing, before you were existing, before your father, your mother, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and on back to whenever we do not know. But Veda is therefore said to be the sort of the wisdom DNA of the universe. It's the universe explaining itself. And therefore it's referred to as anadi, or without beginning, or apurushaya. Purushaya means made by a man, and apurushaya means not made by man, not written by men. But that militates against common sense. Concepts like always in existence don't permit us to apply scientific techniques to evaluate them. So it rubs us up the wrong way, us Westerners. We don't like it. So therefore we try to analyze the Vedas according to linguistics and try to fix them in human history. And I suppose this is a point of departure between those who would confine themselves to a logical analysis and those who want to take a leap of faith. Because it requires a leap of faith to trust that something is apurusha or anadi. And that's the difference between a dharmic person and an adharmic person. See, one is prepared to make that leap of faith and to try to trust the Veda as the ultimate source of wisdom that goes beyond Pratyaksha, Anuman, and Shabda. So, how do we then know it's true? Well, other things in the Vedas have a bearing on ordinary life, like architecture, mathematics, botany, different sciences, Ayurveda. If you're very sick and you consult an Ayurvedic text and then you're healed almost miraculously, your faith in Veda will be substantiated. Just like if I wind down the window in my car if I'm lost and I say to someone outside, I say, can you tell me how to get to? And she says, well, you go down this road and take the third on the left, fourth on the right, go through those traffic lights, and you'll see the sign. And I follow those directions. And it's the correct direction. Then when I see that person again, I will trust them. So the Veda is a little bit like that. If you grow up with it, or if you have a human society that's based on it, faith in Veda will be relatively easy to maintain. If, however, like us, you're coming to it very fresh, then it may be that the trust factor is somewhat limited. So the Vedas are voluminous. If you have, if you're on a beach and you pick up some sand on a beach, you could say that all the sand in your hand is the Vedas that are available to us in this life, in this world. And the remainder of the Vedas is all the sand on all the beaches of the world. So even then, we are not privileged to access all the Veda. How does the Veda come to us? Well, the Veda comes through rishis known as mantra drashta. Mantra drashta means a rishi who, rishi means a viewer, a great sage who, deep in meditation, sees the Veda and channels it, and then bundles the sound vibrations into something called suktas, and the suktas are bundled into something called mandalas, and the mandalas then go to become what we would call chapters and books like that. It doesn't mean they're not mantra kartas. A mantra karta is someone who wrote the Vedas, but they're not described as mantra kartas, they're described as mantra drashtas, those who saw the Vedas, they had vision of the Vedas, like that. And of course, the Vedas before 5,000 years ago were not available in writing. They were preserved by oral tradition from rishi or sage to the disciple to shishya in the Guru Shishya Parampara. And in fact, when Bhaktivinoda Thakur is talking about this ultimate authority of Veda, he doesn't distinguish Veda from Parampara. He says Veda and Parampara have to coexist in order that Amnaya, or the source of true knowledge, is preserved. So there must be a Guru Shishya Sambandh connection, and there must be knowledge that's conveyed by that connection. So in one sense, the illumination that's provided by the Vedas does not depend on your eyes and ears. It's there. It's something in the universe to be accessed. But the method you access it is through something called tapasya, austerity. That's how a mantra drashta gets to see the Veda in the first place. So when you see images of the yogi sitting in the snow, deep in meditation, high up in the Himalayan mountains, he's trying to see the Veda. It requires a turning inwards. It requires pranayam, breath control, pratyaksha, turning inwards, and a deep, deep dhyan or meditation before the Veda is revealed. Once having been revealed, of course, these vibrations, these sounds are passed to the disciple. And in order for the disciple to hold on to those, the disciple must repeat them and teach them and use them, of course. If you don't use the Vedas, you lose the Vedas. In the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, which is something we'll go on to. What is an Upanishad? We'll go on to that. It's described that the sounds of the Vedas are Nishrasitam, or the breathing of Ishvara. So Ishvara is the controlling force throughout the universe, in every atom. This controlling force of Ishvara, or Isha, his breathing, is Nishrasitam, and that is the Veda. So the Bhagavad Purana, the Srimad Bhagavatam, begins by describing the revelation of the first created being, or Brahma. Brahma is named after Brahman. Brahman is described in the Vedas as another word for Ishvara, that which pervades everything, that which is everywhere, that which controls everything, that which is everything. Omnipotent and omniscient. Describes how Brahma heard these vibrations, and then Brahma's manifestation of the universe comes from Vedic mantra. Some sounds can be produced physically. Some sounds of the Vedas, they fall in between two syllables. So it needs to be not written, but pronounced. So the oral tradition is more important. Somebody may say, well, I just want to read the Vedas. I just want to pick up a book and read the Vedas. But you haven't understood the Vedas are meant to be heard. And you have to follow the tradition. You have to follow the formula in order to have the Vedas revealed to you. So the Veda is meant to be reproduced by the breath, the vocal cords, the palate, the tongue, and the lips. And this we know as Sanskrit. But 5,000 years ago, accordingly as the age of Kali was progressing, we have the writing down of Sanskrit in the form of Devanagari, the language which is spoken in the cities of the gods. So since the dawn of the universe, the Vedas are transmitted, and 50 centuries ago they're placed in written language. So the Vedas themselves describe two ways in which knowledge, material knowledge or spiritual knowledge, and don't forget that the Vedas are talking about two things. You need knowledge to fix toothache. You'll find that in the Veda. You find also knowledge to transcend your teeth completely. So you'll find Danta, which is Sanskrit for teeth, and Vedanta, which is Sanskrit for rising above this world. So Veda describes there's two ways to get something knowledgeable. First is Aroha Pantha, which means the ascending path. Mountain climbing is called Aroha. Aroha means climbing up. And the second is descending knowledge, Avaroha Pantha. This is something that is really goes against our understanding of scientific information. Scientific information means we investigate and we prove something to be true or not by our perception. Did you do the experiment? Yes. Did you discover the results? Yes. Vedic knowledge is something that is already decided as true by the universe itself, by God, and descends to us. We open ourselves up as a channel to receive it. So that's the sort of axiomatic truth behind Vedic reception. It's not a mountain climbing of knowledge upon knowledge, stacking the bricks of knowledge like Lego till we reach a pinnacle. But isn't it curious that we always imagine that we are at the pinnacle of knowledge? Because I guess we are. Pinnacle of scientific knowledge is right now, and tomorrow the pinnacle of scientific knowledge will be right now. But Vedic wisdom descends, and we allow ourselves to be a channel of that. And the divine being reveals that knowledge when we're ready to receive it. So, Vedas are not unknown to literary connoisseurs or archaeologists. They're known. And people have looked at the Vedas for a very long time now, hundreds of years. Especially the early explorers going to India, they came across these Sanskrit Vedas. Vedic mathematics, Vedic astrology, astronomy, and they found that the numbers spoken of by the ancient rishis exceeded even the numbers that they'd come to use in Western mathematics. We find that things like mathematical formulae, we'll find those in the Vedas also. And we find miracle cures, geometry. This is all known as Upaveda, architecture, most amazing architectural, and the science of language itself, how we make the sounds that form language. It's very scientific. So all of these things have been studied for a long time. And they left European scholars quite bewildered as to who were the people that could write things like this. Why have we not known of this civilization before? How come this civilization was more advanced than that of the Middle East or our own civilization? And what should we do about it? What should be our response to it? They couldn't wrap their heads around the fact that these people seem to be pagans by their belief, yet at the same time they'd come up with such amazing thing. So let's have a look at some of the different Vedas that were there. I want you to imagine a tree, and this tree is a tree of knowledge. It has roots, trunk, and it has many branches. So the Veda is like that. It's like a tree of wisdom. And the four main branches of the Vedas, of course you could say four, but the early Vedas, that which was revealed by the rishis originally, is the things like the Rig Veda, Atharva Veda, Yajur Veda, and these branches all have sub-branches. For instance, the Rig Veda contains more than 10,000 verses grouped into 1,028 bundles or suktas, poems. And the word Yajur is derived from the word Yaj, or worship. So immediately when you have this word worship, because we translate it as worship, but the worship word means comes from the Anglo-Saxon worthship, that which you place value on, that which is placed before you, that which you hold up to be valued. So the idea of God was the ultimate worshipable person. So the Yajur Veda is for that. And the word yagya, or sacrifice, also comes from yaj. So rig means poetry, yajur means to sacrifice. And the word sama, as in Samaveda, means to make peaceful. These verses in Sanskrit, beautiful poetry, and hymnody, they're meant to be sung, Samaveda verses. And they're all about pleasing the gods. See, some of the Vedas talk about the gods, the humans, the gods, the rishis, and the ultimate God, or Brahman. So all these different Vedas have different purposes. Then on each Veda there's something known as Vedangas and Upangas. These Vedangas and Upangas, Anga means the limb. The different limbs of the Vedas are about how to calculate, how to build elaborate fire ceremonies according to the phases of the moon, and Upangas are like divided into different sections for pronunciation of the mantras. I want you to imagine that everything in Vedic culture was accomplished through sound. You wake up in the morning, there's mantras to chant. You construct a building, there's mantras to chant. there's healing to be done on a sick person, there's mantras to chant. So in this way, there's a mantra for everything. I've seen in my life, just with these 2 eyes, I've seen snake bite be cured by mantra. I've seen or heard of thieves being caught by mantra. Mantras are very powerful. Sometimes we underrate mantras by thinking that, well, I'm chanting a mantra with my tongue. That's a muscle, it's material. I am vibrating the sound in the air. That's air molecules. That's material. My ears are hearing the mantras. That's material. So which part is transcendental? Or we make the mistake. Extremely powerful. And if you find the right mantra, you can be healed even of the most important disease, which is Bhavaroga, or the disease of existence. So then we come to the portions of the Vedas known as the Samhita, the Brahmana, and the Aranyaka. Now the difficult word here is Brahmana because we've heard it. Brahma, Brahman, Brahmana, Brahmin, all these different words. They all signify different things. But a Samhita brings out the meaning of a Veda by different mantras. And a Brahmana portion talks about rituals that are meant to be performed. Then Aranyakas are meant for people who live in the Aranya, or in the forest. And they're meant for those who have renounced sensory pleasures. And these Aranyakas give the reason why sacrifice is meant to be performed. So the Vedas talk about performing sacrifices. The Aranyakas tell us why sacrifice is meant to be done. What's the purpose behind it? So they tend to be more philosophical. At the end of the Aranyakas come the Upanishads. And these ones you will have heard about. Of course, Brihad Anyaraka Aranyaka Upanishad, Isha Upanishad, Kena Upanishad, Kata Upanishad, Svetashvatara Upanishad, many different Upanishads. So Upanishad means come and sit closer, meaning now the Guru is beckoning the Shishya forward to speak some higher knowledge. So when we find in the Vedas elaborate descriptions to worship the gods, not the supreme God, not the ultimate Godhead, but the gods, the different devas like Shiva, Ganesh, like that. In the same Vedas, in the Upanishads, at the end of the book, you could say, the Upanishads are known as Vedanta, or the end of the Veda. There you will find the idea of worshipping the gods to be very much criticized, because the only reason you would worship the gods is not for liberation, but for some material benediction. Same in the Bhagavad Gita. In the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, in the 3rd chapter, we find Krishna explaining that the universe was created and the gods were created, and you should offer sacrifice to the gods. Then at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, we find that only fools worship the gods. They worship me through these other gods, not knowing my origin. So Upanishad is like that. And Upanishads, we find the difference between the body and the soul. We find that there is a soul within the body, a jiva. Jiva is eternal and never changes. And the material body is always changing. It's temporary. We find that happiness, which we can experience through the material body, says one of the Upanishads, that is the equivalent of one, a young man at the peak of life, surrounded by beautiful women, on a golden chariot, living in a palace, eating the finest foods. This is the perfection of enjoyment on the material platform, but that's equal to one. And those who are On the receiving end of the bliss of the gods, that's 100. Those who've achieved liberation, that's multiplied by 1,000. So there's a progressive hierarchy of enjoyment that we can have if we follow the Upanishads. I suppose it's meant to make you take up that path. So this is known as Upanishad Dharma. And of course, Srila Prabhupada regularly quotes from the Upanishads. And even the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna himself is quoting the Upanishad verses to Arjuna. And all the different schools of philosophy in India, ancient and modern, will follow the Upanishads. They'll learn them off by heart, and students will be able to recite them. So in the Upanishads, we find 5 subject matters: the nature of Brahman, the nature of everything that is, the nature of the individual self, i.e. the conscious observer who's noticing, witnessing, experiencing this Brahman. What's the relationship between the two? The origin and development of the universe, in other words, the big macrocosm. If I, myself, am a tiny universe, then what is the big universe? What's my relationship to that? What's the God's relationship to that, or Brahman's relationship to that? Then, number 4, the means of attaining Brahman. I'm suffering. It's because I don't have full knowledge of myself. If I had full knowledge of myself, I would not be attached to the transitory material body. And so, how do I get that knowledge? How do I attain Brahman? And what is the ultimate goal of life? What's the supreme? When do I stop? And what's it like when I do stop? So when you take all of the Upanishads together, you can, if you were to take all the Upanishads together, and let's say you had a blender, a transcendental NutriBullet or Vitamix, you put all the Upanishads in, you'd have a smoothie at the end. What would be the smoothie? Well, the flavor of the smoothie would be something called the Vedanta Sutra, which is the essence, the flavor of all the Vedantas, Vedantic wisdom, commented upon by Srila Vyasadeva, who compiled all the others. So we find that Vedanta Sutras, 555 very terse, compact verses. In other words, it's the juice, the essence of the juice. And we find that there's, in these 555 verses, we find logical arguments or mini arguments. This is in Vedanta Sutra. So these mini arguments are 192 in number. And they start off and they end all within a few verses. So they start off with, first of 5 points is Vishaya, a statement, then comes a doubt, then a presentation of a view opposed to the original statement, then a conclusion, and then a confirmation from different sources elsewhere in the Upanishads. So there's 192 of these, 555 verses compacted into 192 mini arguments. And they're so terse that they need commentary. So every school of wisdom in India has its own commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. That's how you get to be a school. You can't be a school unless you have that. So then we've done Veda, we've done Brahmana, Aranyaka, we've done Upanishads, we've done Vedanta Sutra. Now we come to the Puranas. So Puranas are slightly different. Purana means history. And it says that these microscopic arguments that we find in Vedanta Sutra and throughout the Vedas are made large by the Puranas in the form of stories. That doesn't mean imaginary stories, mythology, folklore, or fairy tales. They are actual histories of the transaction between humans and gods, sages and humans, God and gods, like that, all the different relationships of the different levels of hierarchy of consciousness, the relationship to each other, and what knowledge has been passed between them. So we learn what to do and what not to do from the Puranas. So 18 major Puranas, but traditionally there are 5 subjects for every Purana. There's Sarga, or creation, then Pratisarga, secondary creation. So who created the world? Well, in the Vedic understanding, who created the creator of the world? Who created the creator of the world? And then how did that creator create the world? We have Brahma. Not simply that God created the world, but God created a God, another God who created the world. And then who were the first human beings in that creation? Well, here's another difference. That the evolution is actually a devolution. That the advanced human beings at the beginning of the universe have now devolved into the people that you see around you, who may or may not have some taste for transcendental adventure. But in these sort of cosmic or universal family trees, there are 2 aspects: those who look after the world and those who look after the universe itself. So those who look after the world are known as kings, if you like, and then the Manus look after the universe. And finally, the details of the dynasties of kings and saints also, the Vamsa Anu Charitra. So these are the 5 subjects of a Purana. So of the 18 Puranas, 6 are meant for those who are more influenced by the mode of ignorance, 6 more for those in the mode of passion, 6 for those in the mode of goodness. And of those in the mode of goodness, one of them, particular one of them, known as the Bhagavat Purana, is said to be at the highest level. Why? Because Srila Vyasadeva had compiled the Veda. He and his disciples had written the Veda down into the Devanagari, the Sanskrit script, the Upanishads, the Vedanta Sutra, commented on the Vedanta Sutra. And now what? He was still feeling despondent. So his guru came to him and said, the reason you're feeling despondent is because you haven't quite finished. The despondency you feel is because you haven't directly glorified the Supreme Lord Krishna. You should do that. So he went deep, deep, deep into meditation. And then he saw Krishna. He saw the Lord of the material and spiritual energies. He saw the illusion or the bewildering energy, Maya. He saw the Jiva. He saw the full relationships between them. Then he began to prepare the reader of the Bhagavad Purana by telling stories of the different incarnations and the different saints and rishis who'd appeared in the world. The whole principle is one of avatar, coming down to give knowledge, just like the Vedas come down rather than we go up. So the Vedas incarnate, if you like, in the form of the Lord in different incarnations, different avatars. And he spends quite a few thousand verses describing the different avatars before getting to the portion about Krishna. So the 18,000 verses are grouped into 335 chapters, of which 90 chapters tell the story of Krishna in the 10th canto. The 11th canto finishes off the story of Krishna by Krishna telling stories. That is 31 chapters. And then we have this closing verse, Sarva Vedanta Saram, Hi Shri Bhagavatam Ishite, Tadra Samrita Triptasya, Nanyatra Syadrati Kvachit. Srimad Bhagavatam is declared to be the essence of all Vedanta philosophy. One who has felt satisfaction from its taste, which is like nectar, will never be attracted to any other literature. That's in the final book in the 12th canto. It's known as a Mahapurana because the Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Purana, in addition to the 5 ordinary subjects for every Purana, it has a further 5. Uttaya, Ishanukata, Nirodha, Mukti. These are the different relationships between the living beings and the sages and the deities, and liberation, moksha. And then finally, ashraya, how to take shelter of God, God's mercy. So that's the Puranas and the Bhagavad Purana. I'll just finish off by saying something about itihasa. Itihasa means directly translated, it means it happened thus. It happened thus. So these are also histories, but they're written by a person who was contemporary with the events. And into that category we find Mahabharata and Ramayana. And these texts don't have to follow the structure of the Puranas. So they're histories, but they're more less condensed. So therefore the Mahabharata is 100,000 verses plus. The Ramayana is 24,000 verses. So it's an expanded history of just one incarnation rather than a compilation of different incarnations. So different acharyas or great teachers have commented that the itihasas are the 5th Veda. 4 Vedas, 5th Veda. And this is also mentioned in the Bhavishya Purana. So the Bhagavad Gita is also within the Mahabharata. It's in the Shanti Bharava section, which is one of the sections of the Mahabharata. And Bhagavad Gita takes up 700 verses of the 100,000 verses of the Mahabharata. So it's not a lot, but it's the pearl in the oyster of the whole story. Now, if you want to debate anything in India from 1,000 years ago, maybe you sat down for a debate, you would have to discuss the Vedas. But which Vedas? Well, they would say, since the days of Adi Shankaracharya, which is sort of about 800 AD, Adi Shankaracharya, throughout India standardized it and said that you have to debate. If you want to debate, you have to do that from what is known as the 3 starting places. The prasthan means when you're running a race, you got a starting block, and they're on the starting block. They're under starters orders. So the starting block for debate, that's called the prasthan. Prasthan means the starting block for debate. There are 3, and so it's called prasthan, prasthana trayi, or the 3 starting places. That is the Upanishads, Vedanta Sutra, and Bhagavad Gita. That is why we always encourage everybody to learn verses from the Bhagavad Gita, from the Upanishads, and Prabhupada has given us the Isha Upanishad to learn. And he's also quoted from the Katha, Kena, and different other Upanishads, and also from Vedanta Sutra a few verses. So these will see you through any medieval debate that you may happen to fall into. So I think we'll rest there. We've done quite well, and we shall carry on next time. So thank you very much for listening.